Crossing over ahead of Black Friday. Is Nebraska in for more heartbreak against Iowa? That's next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska and Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, welcome
Mitch,
in.
good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yes, has been a while. Good to see you. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Trent Condon is with me. Trent, you want to take it away, and we'll get going on this crossover episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, both of us been covering our respective teams for a lot of times, and we've seen this rivalry kind of morph into what it is today. So we're going to break down, obviously, the game. We're going to take a look at the matchup. Heartbreak. I know you use that terminology from the Nebraska side, the jubilation from the Hawkeye side that we've seen in so many close games. And certainly on the surface, I think feels like one of those games also coming up here. Iowa's long winning streak in Lincoln. So we got a lot of different layers that we want to get into today. But, what I like to do a lot of times in these crossover episodes that we do is just get that overview. This is a little different because it's a rivalry game. I know a lot of my brethren in Western Iowa, they keep very close tabs on you guys over there in Nebraska. And we do as a whole. Iowa has so many rivals. It is a little bit different. So we have a pretty good idea, but Iowa comes in 7-4. Nebraska comes in 7-4. We have some disappointment, certainly on this side. Is disappointment, that be the right term that would use? Yeah, you're bowl eligible. Maybe you're taking a step forward. Is this season currently looked at as a disappointment or a step forward for Nebraska football?
Well, when you look at the games that Nebraska's lost and the way that Nebraska's lost them, and fresh in the minds of Nebraska fans is that 37-10 loss at Penn State. The losses are tremendously disappointing. I think Nebraska feels like this is a missed opportunity. What's happened here? The schedule set up well for Nebraska to have 8 or 9 wins at this point. And there's debate about whether this is an 8 or 9 win team, but if Nebraska had played Iowa's schedule and had played Oregon and Indiana, it might be a different story, but Nebraska got Michigan at the perfect time without its head coach, freshman quarterback, first start on the road. Nebraska got USC at a nice time when the Trojans were by no means a juggernaut and were there for the taking. Nebraska probably wins that game if Dylan Raiola doesn't get hurt in the middle of the third quarter. Huskers had a comfortable lead at that point and were driving, and the Minnesota game was a debacle. The Penn State game, although Nebraska was definitely outclassed in terms of talent as Penn State found itself, that game was a debacle. So yeah, it's disappointing at this point, but Friday has the opportunity to turn the tables for Nebraska, because if Nebraska, and I would say beating Iowa is punching up for Nebraska. That's the problem this year with Nebraska. It's won the games where it's been able to punch down. It has not won the games where it was punching up. Those 3 that I mentioned, and Minnesota, it just fits into a different category of its own in just being a mess. So this would be a win for Nebraska if it can pull this off in a game where it has to punch up against Iowa. And I think that would in some ways fix the season, because it's been a disappointment, but it hasn't been a disappointment on the level where it can't still be corrected.
Yeah, and you get to Florida, you get to a nice bowl game, and in the Outback Bowl, I think that's a likely. We'll talk about that in some of the scenarios in front of us here a little bit later on, Mitch. I want to go to the quarterback spot. You mentioned the injury in that USC game to Raiola. Then you have his little brother decommitting last week. Lateef looked so good in that first start against UCLA. Not so much last week against Penn State. Take us in, because it's not just about an injury to a quarterback. There are so many layers here with the family connections with the Raiolas. There's so much there. So fill in some of the Hawkeye fans a little bit deeper, because this story, everything that kind of surrounds it, it's so intriguing, coupled with a true freshman that's looked really good at times at the quarterback spot.
Yeah, it is intriguing, and it's hard to know looking in from the outside on this. So the Raiolas aren't talking about this. Dylan Raiola suffered a broken leg on November 1st in the USC game. He's had surgery. He's back in Lincoln with the team. Didn't travel to UCLA. Was right after the surgery. Didn't travel to Penn State. He'll be there on Friday. He's, by all accounts, been supportive of TJ Lateef. The expectation at this moment is that Dylan Raiola comes back for a third year as the starting quarterback next season, and Lateef can be his understudy again. Now we know how things work in college football. It's very difficult to retain two quarterbacks starting experience at any program, and that will be a challenge for Nebraska to address in December and January. But in the midst of this, Dylan's brother Dayton, who's 2 years younger, a senior at Buford High in Georgia, one of the best high school teams in the country, committed to Nebraska since September of 2024, opts to decommit. This comes right around the time that Dylan gets hurt, and TJ Lateef, the true freshman who's just 1 year older than Dayton Raiola, stars in the UCLA game, leads Nebraska to victory on the road in his first career start. And it should be mentioned that there's a 2027 quarterback for Nebraska who's been committed for several months now and has loomed so large for Nebraska in the building process, the building of momentum, peer recruiting. Trey Taylor, I'm talking about, who's a borderline 5-star kid out of Chicago, and he's at all the home games, and so has Dayton been until now, of course. But Trey Taylor had really, a year younger, stolen a lot of the thunder, I think, from Dayton Raiola and his profile within the Nebraska quarterback hierarchy, despite being 2 years out almost from ever having the chance to play in a game. It got to the point where between Lateef and Taylor, it was hard to see Dayton Raiola's spot in the future. So not a shock from that perspective that he took a step back and said, I'm gonna go seek out seek some different options here, see what's there for me, and decommit from Nebraska. But it does make you wonder about what the ramifications are within the family, within the Raiola family, and how this might affect Dylan. Now, I don't think that Dayton's decommitment is going to cause Dylan Raiola to leave, but if there's more that's happening beneath the surface, and if there's any kind of disharmony between the Raiolas and Nebraska, then that could also factor in whatever the short-term future is, the long-term future is for Dylan. And, it's probably something we won't find out too much about for another few weeks.
Drama on that front. We had some drama in this game a year ago. Now we're going to flip the script. We had the non-handshake before overtime. We had dance around at the 50-yard line. We had a whole bunch of things that went into it. This feels like we are really turning it into a rivalry. But when some team has won on the opponent's home field in every game since 2011, people say on now the other side of the river, maybe this isn't a rivalry yet. Nebraska's got to get one at least at home. You're going to flip the script here, Mitch. Ask me some questions. We'll do that as we continue. It's a crossover edition, Locked On Nebraska and Locked On Hawkeyes. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything, who will score next, 2 fourth-quarter comebacks, but not just NBA. They got you covered. College basketball, obviously, it's feast week. They got you covered on that front. Maybe you're taking a look at the Black Friday matchup with Iowa, Nebraska. Iowa currently up to a 6-point favorite in that game. Over, under, you can hit it all on the FanDuel app and take a peek at everything happening with your team. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's right, $300 for new customers in bonus bets with your first $5 bet if it wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, welcome back. Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska. Oh, here we go. I'll take it out of the break here. Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska and Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen of the day, and thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. I'm Mitch Sherman here with Trent Condon, and as we discussed at the end of the last segment, I am going to take the opportunity to ask you about what's going on with the Iowa Hawkeyes. So, all right, What does Iowa have in store for Nebraska this time, Trent? This is my question. This is a long-winded question, and I want to set this up by reviewing just a bit what has happened when the Hawkeyes have visited Memorial Stadium in the last few years. So give me your thoughts on that, and then perhaps what is going to happen this time. So 2 years ago, 13-10, we remember Marshall Meter, the backup kicker who hadn't been on the field in a year. This is after Chubba Purdy, the Nebraska backup QB, inexplicably throws a pick with 15 seconds to play. Nebraska's denied bowl eligibility as Meter hits a 38-yard field goal. 2 years before that, Iowa scores 19 points in the fourth quarter to win 28-21. 2 years before that, it was Keith Duncan with the 48-yard field goal as time expired. After Nebraska came back twice from 14 points down in that game, Huskers are denied bowl eligibility. Iowa waves, says Merry Christmas to Nebraska as the Hawks leave the field. You have 2015 when Nebraska was denied bowl eligibility. 2017, 2013, those were blowout Iowa wins. So what do we forecast Iowa having up its sleeve in this game against Nebraska based on the kind of team that Kirk Ferentz is bringing to Lincoln?
More the same, more than anything. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot different. The hope coming into this season is we were going to see more growth out of the passing game. The addition of Mark Gronowski coming in from South Dakota State, multi-time national champion at the FCS level, and a guy that put up big numbers. What we've seen from him, I think he's turned out to be an even better runner than anybody anticipated. But the passing, there's definitely still some holes. He started the first game of the year against Albany. They tried to throw it. They couldn't. He got too ramped up. That was something that was kind of odd. Had struggles against Iowa State. Then even a week ago against Michigan State, it's senior day. For whatever reason, Mark Gronowski is just a guy that he gets too amped up. He gets too accelerated, and you see that in the passing. Another component to Gronowski at the quarterback spot, and probably why we haven't seen maybe the growth in the passing game, is he had that knee injury against Indiana. And if he doesn't injure his knee, there's not a doubt in my mind that they beat the Hoosiers that day. But that aside, since then, there's been many times where just mechanically you see him kind of short arm things. He leaves balls out in front or even short of his receivers. And it's because I think of that knee injury. He just doesn't step into the throw with the same ability, doesn't have maybe that same kind of pocket presence that we saw at different points in the time. So Gronowski is a passer. He's kind of like Iowa quarterbacks have been the last 5-6 years. Not real apt to go down the field, going to do it. But what he is a tremendous runner. And that adds another component to this Iowa team. His running ability, he's rushed for a touchdown and 14 rushing touchdowns. I think the number this season off the top of my head. He is tremendous, and he is a big physical runner, not just a speed guy on the outside, but he can also do it with his wheels faster than you think. So that's kind of the only difference, a dynamic runner for the Iowa quarterback compared to what you normally see. Tight ends have been banged up. We've had a redshirt freshman that has emerged. You're used to seeing Iowa tight ends. This offensive line has been really good, but really banged up. They ended the USC game down to just 2 of their starting offensive linemen. 3 were hurt in the course of that one. So they're banged up. Everybody's banged up here. But yeah, if you're looking, what's different about Iowa? Not much. It's Iowa football under Kirk Ferentz.
Of course, no Caleb Johnson on this team. He hurt Nebraska badly a year ago with the one big play, and that's all it took in that 13-10 win in Iowa City. How dangerous is Kamari Moton, Iowa's running back here as a compliment, or maybe Gronowski is the compliment? They're a 1-2 punch clearly in running the football.
I would say Kamari Moton, he came into the year. Now, these were some offshore odds that were out there, but he was the second betting choice to lead the Big Ten in rushing this year. Last year, averaged over 5.5 yards per carry in a backup role to Caleb Johnson. He had a bunch of big runs also in that role, and that hasn't been the case this year. He got banged up earlier this season, had to leave and sat out, I think, 2 different games. Came back even earlier, I think, than people thought with the shoulder injury against Rutgers, and played well. He gets you the yards that are there, but there just hasn't been a whole lot more. Last year, he had 3 runs of over 20 yards, just 1 so far this season. So he's going to make the makeables, but he hasn't been a difference maker this season. I think a lot of people thought he was going to be. He's fine. He's a good, solid B, maybe a B- at the quarterback spot. Again, it goes back to Gronowski. That is the guy. I think that is kind of the dynamic part of this running game this season. Got some backups too, Jazzy and Patterson. He'll come in and run hard. He might run into the back of one of his offensive linemen. There's not a whole lot of wiggle to him. He just powers it straight forward. He's going to get you forward seemingly every single time, but maybe not much more than that. So overall, with as good as this Iowa offensive line has been this year, I would say, at least as it concerns the running backs, running backs have been a little bit of a disappointment this year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the way that works, and that's probably more of a concern for Nebraska than if it had been the opposite. The Huskers have had troubles this year with running quarterbacks, and that's not a shock. Running quarterbacks give defenses that are suspect against the run a lot of problems. But up until last week at Penn State with the dual-headed running backs, it had been Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati, Bryce Underwood from Michigan, Jaden Mayava from USC, who really provided the daggers. And I say dagger, that there was no dagger for Cincinnati. Nebraska was able to get the interception in the end zone in the season opener to win that game. But he was given the Nebraska defense all kinds of fits throughout. This one, tell me if you agree, it sets up as a day, and we can maybe talk some about the playing conditions that are expected in this game in the third segment here today. But whether it's going to be 40 degrees and sunny, which it's not, or 30 degrees and windy and possibly snowing, we know what Iowa wants to do offensively in this game, not just against Nebraska, but maybe even more so against Nebraska because of the problems that Nebraska has had defending the run. Iowa's going to come in and run the ball. Is there anything that the Hawks will even do to disguise that, or do they just say, hey, we're going to line up and do what we do, you try to stop us?
I don't anticipate a whole lot of that. I think you're going to see Nebraska probably able throughout the course of this game have 8 guys in the box, and they're going to play bully ball. And I think this is the blueprint. This has been the game plan for the better part now of 15 years that they want to play against Nebraska, and it's worked out incredibly well. They want to go out there. They want to be the more physical team, and for the most part, Nebraska hasn't been able to answer. There might be more recruiting talent. There might be more blue chip talent, but year in and year out, I was able to win it at times when Nebraska has more talent. Well, just ugly it up, give yourself a chance, and then make a goofy play, get a block punt, whatever has happened in the past. Have a guy that's hadn't made a field goal or kicked a point ever for Iowa in his career come in there and barely get one over the crossbar from 38 years. That's what Iowa does. But some of the frustration from the Iowa perspective, they do that against everybody. It's not just about kind of tightening that gap. It's also letting Michigan State last week hang around and get a 10-point lead against you, a team that hadn't won a game in the conference. That it happens too many times against teams that are on the other side of the ledger than a program like Nebraska. So that's where the frustration comes in. But yeah, I think the game plan is going to be very similar. The wide receivers, for the most part, have been pretty pedestrian this year. Haven't seen a whole lot in the deep passing game. I mentioned the young tight end, DJ Vonnegut. Mitch, I want to have you get your eye. He's a Western Iowa kid. He's from Kemper over there in the western half of the state. He's just a redshirt freshman. He came as a walk-on. I don't want to put this is the next Sam Laporta. This is the next George Kittle. This is the next, and we can play this game for a long time, but there is something special about him. Still's got a long ways to go, I think, as it pertains to as a blocker to become kind of that full-time guy, but he's got some wiggle to him. He's got some size. He's got the athleticism they look for, 6'4", 6'5". He can move, and he might be the one, and he's been coming on here these last couple of weeks. So if you're looking for somebody maybe to slide up the seam and actually get something big in the passing game, I wouldn't look at the wide receivers. I'd probably look at Vonnegut.
Yeah, he could be the next Noah Fant. Where
that could be dangerous words.
We'll get out of this segment on this, and then we'll talk about some of that rivalry conversation and the weather and predictions when we come back. But where is Iowa most improved throughout the season? Because I watched the Hawks at the beginning of the year, and it was a struggle to get a first down at times against competition that was quite a bit below what Iowa has faced and competed against very well. Now, not won the games. We all know about the 4 losses against ranked teams by 15 points. So I always had a hard time getting over the top against teams that are better than Nebraska. But where have you seen this team improve the most in this 7-win season?
I think more than anything, and it's kind of a surprise, I'm sure, for people that haven't been watching every week, is defensively. This team defensively in the first month of the year really was struggling. They started to flip the switch in October. And really, it started in the second half of the game against Rutgers. It was on a Friday night. They looked brutal in that first half on the defensive side. Missed assignments, blown coverage all over the place, missed tackles. And since then, they have really improved in that area. One thing, and when we talked about differences, I was talking more offensively. This is different, much different than any Iowa team under Phil Parker, their fine defensive coordinator, is they're blitzing a whole lot more than they ever have. on a typical year under Phil Parker, they're usually between 15 and 18% in terms of blitz rate. That's almost double this season. And it's come because I think a myriad of reasons. Defensive line hasn't been able to get home nearly as much. But the other part is their defensive backs, for whatever reason, are really good. Xavier Wampa, he times it up so incredibly well, coming in either off the edge or even coming up the middle of one of their safeties. John, you got a couple of different guys that I don't know why. I don't know if it's just these guys click a little bit better because Parker's brought pressure in the past. They're blitzing a whole lot more. And these guys are actually good at it. So I think you'll see plenty of that. Their linebacker in the middle, Carson Shire, he's another guy that'll probably be bringing pressure a whole lot. They bring more pressure than ever before. So that's the difference, and the improvement has certainly come when they started doing that. Go back and watch the Indiana game. This defense has looked a whole lot different. It's continued throughout the course of the year.
All right, we'll come back with a forecast for Friday. That's next. All right, right now a word from Game Time. It is rivalry week in college football, and we could not be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, as I mentioned, the energy in the stands. There's nothing like what's going on this week around the country, around the Big Ten. But actually getting tickets to get into the stadium can sometimes feel like more of a battle than the game itself. You have to deal with endless queues, hidden fees, prices that jump at checkout. That's why when I go to a game, whether it's a football game, a basketball game, it could be a concert, any kind of an event, I use Game Time. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Take a look at Zone Deals. With Zone Deals, you pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and then you save the money. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets and all tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today.
Back with you one final time on this crossover edition, Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On Nebraska. I'm Trent Condon. He is Mitch Sherman. All right, let's get into it. What we expect to see Black Friday. All right, got to start with the weather, and you brought that up. I have not been, I probably should be going to be in Sioux City visiting family up there, so I probably should be looking at the weather conditions, but I haven't dove too deep into it. So fill us in what you saw over there, what we're going to see across the border for us as you look at the forecast 11 a.m. kickoff over in Lincoln at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, let me put on my meteorologist cap here and open up the app that will help me with that. So Friday is calling for a high of 37 in Lincoln, a low of 32. So it's going to be in the 30s at 11 a.m. And then a 75% chance of snow, sleet, or rain with wind gusts up to 30 miles an hour. So this is Big Ten football in November. I remember the game, of course. It was only a year ago at Kinnick Stadium. And per the norm, I spent some time down on the playing surface during warm-ups and, to get a feel for things. You want to get up close with the players and coaches, see, get a sense of the vibe. After about 90 seconds on the field last year, I went back upstairs. That was enough. And if that forecast holds true, although it will be warmer, like air temperature wise on Friday in Lincoln, I think the playing conditions and just like the overall miserable factor is going to be higher this week than it was a year ago.
And Iowa's played in a couple of rain games already this year, the downpour throughout against Oregon, and then the road trip out to USC. Get to go out to LA, and what do you get hit with? More weather. So Iowa's played in that a couple of different times. The wind conditions, I think, are interesting too. And one thing that we didn't get into, Mitch, is Kirk Ferentz brought this up right away when he started in his press conference earlier this week to preview the matchup, is he talked a lot about those special teams. Special teams had been an issue and has been an issue in this game a lot in the past. Feels like they've really shored things up there, both in the kicking punting department, but also what you've seen in the return game.
Definitely in the return and coverage area. The place kicking has been a little bit inconsistent with the transfer Kyle Cunan, and he was good at the start of the year. And as you get into as you get into the cold weather in the Big Ten, it hasn't been as consistent. Archie Wilson is Nebraska's true freshman punter. The Huskers are trying to find the next Tory Taylor from down under. Wilson actually is from the same lineage as Taylor, and it's not that he modeled his game after Tory, but Nebraska would love to have identified that guy. He's actually more a product of the Mike Eckler school of special teams. So Mike Eckler, former Nebraska assistant, Kansas State player from the Omaha area. He was at Tennessee for the last several years, and he brought in Jackson Ross as an Aussie punter. Just about every team in the SEC has an Aussie punter. So Nebraska has one of these guys, and Archie has been good. It's been a big change for Nebraska with what it's used to in the punting area. But in terms of returns, kickoff returns, punt returns, and all of the coverage areas, it's been a big upgrade for Nebraska this year. In fact, the Penn State had one decent punt return last Saturday night, as just about everything went wrong for Nebraska. And that was the first one for really any kind of positive yardage against the Nebraska coverage team all season. Their yards allowed were under 5 yards on the season before Penn State got loose for about a 20-yard return. So that will be a huge objective for Nebraska on Friday, is to keep the ball away from Caden Weechin. In a game like this, where possessions are going to be minimized, I would say points are going to be at a premium because of the weather and the style of offense that both these teams want to play. The team that gets something going in special teams, you make one or two plays in special teams, and it very well may win the game.
I think it's going to be a big factor. I think it's going to come into the end. So as we look at this game, 39.5, by the way, the over-under in this game by FanDuel. And I think I really, really like the under in that one after you mentioned those weather conditions. Iowa favored, it's up to 6.5 too. And that's a huge surprise to me. It feels like a field goal game. It feels like it's going to come down to the end. It's going to be a kick one way or the other. It's going to be 3. It seems like too many in this spot. There's so many that goes into this, and I just don't see Iowa being dynamic enough, offensively to open things up. The weather conditions, everything that goes into it. Do you see it another way, or do you think it's going to come down to the end? And if you have to make your official prediction, what do you got?
If the over under, what did you say it was, 39.5? If it was 29.5, I would still say under, Trent. So when you have a number that's that low, 6.5 is huge. That's almost a blowout if you win by 6.5, 7 points in a game where the points are going to be at that much of a premium. Yeah, I absolutely see it as a field goal game. If you were to gauge these teams based on their strengths and their weaknesses and line them up, put them into a computer formula, I understand where it comes out with Iowa being a full touchdown better. I think Iowa is a touchdown better than Nebraska, but you put this game at Memorial Stadium in these conditions on Black Friday, knowing the kind of emotions that are going to be swirling. And I do want to ask you about this before we end the show, to ask you about those emotions and how it might carry over from last year. But we'll get a little bit out of order here, and I'll give you my prediction. I'm going to say for the third year in a row, 13-10 Iowa, just because that would rub the salt into the wounds of Nebraska's fans and players even more. And I feel like that's just what is destined to happen in this series until Nebraska proves that it's a program that can turn things the other way. And I haven't seen that in 11 games this year.
Well, here's a good note for Nebraska fans. Iowa had a winning streak in Ames dating back to 2011. It ended this year. I don't think this one ends, though, this year. I think Iowa does it out of walk-off again. But this one, I'm going to throw a little caveat in here. Iowa down by 2, 16-14. Missed field goal, not overtime that you can hope for. No, you lose the game, and Drew Stevens walks it off. Another kiss to the crowd as he makes his way off the field in his parting shot. 17-16, I got the Hawkeyes winning it on a walk-off.
All right, are you projecting a safety in there to get Iowa to 16?
Well, I was, is it 3 field goals? Is it a safety in there? 2-point conversion? It's Iowa football. There's going to be something weird.
Okay, before we wrap this thing up, before we say goodbye, You mentioned in the first segment about how, and this is valid, with Nebraska having not won in this game at home in Lincoln since 2011. Now the Huskers did win in 2022 in Iowa City, but 9 of the last 10 have gone Iowa's direction. You mentioned that, well, there's some sentiment on the Iowa part that if this is going to be a rivalry, then Nebraska has to do what Nebraska has to hold up its end of the deal. Now, just about all of these games have come down to 3 points or 7 points, so they are competitive. Like, there's no question that the games are highly contested. But in talking to Nebraska players and Nebraska coordinators on Tuesday in Lincoln, I got a real mixed vibe. So early in the days of the Big Ten, and even into the last, maybe until the last 2 or 3 years, there's always been, like, the majority of the conversation from the Nebraska side has been, yeah, we don't really see it that way. It's just another game. It's not really a rivalry. There's just not enough history there. We have a lot of respect for Iowa. The fans don't like each other, or maybe they do like each other because they live next to each other in, neighborhoods in Omaha or Des Moines or wherever that might be. But the vast majority of players and coaches at Nebraska always kind of towed the line and, like, refused to go over it and say that it meant more. That's not what I hear coming out of Lincoln this week. There's a few holdovers. Henry Lutovsky, the Iowa native who grew up a Notre Dame fan, he's never gonna admit to that, even if he feels the disdain for Iowa. For him, it's just another game. But like Dana Holgerson, Iowa native, he said, no, this one means more. He goes, you can feel it around here this week. It means more. And he had just arrived at Nebraska last year when the Huskers went into Kinnick Stadium, and we don't need to rehash, but the situation at the 50-yard line before the game, the handshake before the coin toss, Jay Higgins and Matt Rule after the game. Like, I think that Nebraska, there's more there's more emotion. There's more, like, digging in their heels and saying, yeah, all right, we'll admit it. We don't like them, coming out of Nebraska camp this week. What in any way has that, or is that shifting in either direction for Iowa?
It is interesting because Kirk Ferentz is very even keel, not too high, not too low. That's how this program's been built the last 27 years, but there's always extra juice for certain matchups. And Kirk, with his age, what Nebraska was for him, growing up, what it morphed into, obviously, in the 90s. This one means something, I think, to Kirk Ferentz. Penn State means something. He's a Pennsylvania native. He wanted to go to Penn State. He wasn't good enough to play at Penn State. So that game means something for him. There are certain matchups and rivalry games. They are important. Though Iowa has 4 trophy games they play for every year, and they're all important in their own realm, this one, I think, carries even a little bit more weight. Some of the things have been said about the Iowa program. Kirk Ferentz doesn't forget anything. He remembers everything.
No question.
And when you got a loudmouth athletic director, taking shots at your program, he's not going to forget. He relishes, I think,
just 10 years ago, but hey,
every year. No, and he won't forget, though, because he brings up still on Tuesday, he brought up a guy, I think, from 1982. He doesn't forget.
I love it. I love it when he does that. It's every press conference. Yep.
It is absolutely every single time. You're going to get some kind of reference to back in the day. That's who he is, and he's not going to forget. So it's always been a part of that one. But is this game bigger inside the buildings over there at Fort Kinnick than the Minnesota game, than the Wisconsin game these last few years? I think so. I think there is a little bit something there. And I think it's a part of it is that Iowa has felt disrespected by Nebraska. Even though they've dominated this series now for the better part of 15 years, they still feel disrespected. And Kirk, he likes that role. He'll have his team ready to go. It won't be because of lack of effort. It won't be because they're not ready. Nebraska could go out there and beat them. That can happen, but it's not going to be because of that. Yeah, I think this is one Kirk every single year. He's got the Huskers circled.
All right. That will get us out of here. Trent, it was great to visit with you today. Can't wait until Friday to see how this thing plays out, if it comes down to a field goal or 1 point as you're projecting. Yeah. Thanks for listening and watching today. Please subscribe and follow Locked On Nebraska and Locked On Hawkeyes. Connor and I will be back on Thursday with our weekly mailbag Thanksgiving edition. Trent will have you covered on his Locked On Hawkeyes feed. And thanks for making us your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig is there to break down the most exciting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championships and everything in between. Find Locked On Big Ten wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.